Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Writers Podcast. I have with me today fantasy writer Zachary Hagen. Hello, Zachary. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for
Great.
having me, Lou.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk to writers. I'm very curious about how writers write and what inspires them to write and all that kind of fun stuff. And hopefully we'll touch some of that as we get into the interview. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and your background?
Sure. So, my first passion has always been words and writing. I
Mm-hmm.
taught English for 2 years. I'm now teaching math.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm here because I am an author.
Mm-hmm.
My first two books came out between September of last year, and the second one came out in March of this year. And I'm planning another release for November of this year.
Okay.
So, I'm
And
excited
you're
about that.
primarily a fantasy writer?
I am. I have a sci-fi novel in the works for when this series is finished, but
Okay.
primarily.
Okay. So you've always had a passion for words. I just have to ask because you mentioned it. You said you taught English for 2 years and then you switched to math. Was that because you were finding teaching English was interfering with your writing, or was that just something that happened that you had no control over?
It was a very strange situation. So I was taking a break from teaching to
Mm.
focus on writing and my master's degree,
Okay.
and the side gig I was doing was not making any money.
Okay.
The harder I tried, the worse it was. So I thought, okay, something or someone is telling me that I need to be doing something else. Maybe I need to be back in the classroom. And I was currently getting a master's that would get me a math certification when I was finished with it. So I applied to basically any teaching job that I was qualified for, and the one that opened up happened to be a math position. So I am now teaching math.
Okay.
Totally unplanned, but it's one of those things where life just happens.
Right. Yep. Sure. I just wanted to make sure if that was just this decision that you had made to just make sure that your writing didn't get burnt out by being an English teacher.
Oh
um,
no, I
no.
loved teaching English. It
Oh,
didn't really
okay.
interfere at all. In fact, I
Oh,
think that
okay.
it kind of helped with my writing in some ways.
Ah,
I've noticed my spelling skills have deteriorated a little bit since I started
oh,
teaching math.
oh,
So now
okay.
autocorrect is my best friend when I've switched letters or if I've forgotten one.
Right. So, did you grow up with a love for reading?
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading things like the Chronicles of Narnia when I was a
Right.
really little kid. It was probably the first series that I ever finished.
Mm.
Series of Unfortunate Events also um, got me. I was a huge binge reader, so anything that was a series that had, five or more books, I was there.
Right.
Um, and then my parents kept little paper books that I'd stapled together and drawn little pictures and wrote sort
Mm.
of nonsensical stories in. So the desire to write has been there for a very long time.
Okay, cool. And with your education, did you focus on writing at all in your post high school education?
I did. I received a minor in English.
Mm-hmm.
A big portion of that was devoted to creative writing classes and sort of the craft of writing and the history of literature.
Okay. And what about creative writing courses?
Yeah, that was about a quarter of my minor was made up of
Okay.
creative writing courses.
All right. Very good. And so right now, today, who do you like to read? What kind of who's your favorite authors? So what types of books?
I recently have been listening to, because I do more audiobooks
Oh,
since
okay.
I'm so busy.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been listening to the Last Airbender series, the one that I forget his first name, but his last name is Lee. He wrote a couple books about Kyoshi, and then one about Yang Chen from the Last Airbender universe, and I've been enjoying those.
Okay. So for your writing, what's your method of operation? Like, how do you set a certain time aside every day to do it? Do you have try to read a word count, or how does that? How do you juggle that with your teaching?
Sure. I'd say it varies depending on where I am in the writing process.
Okay.
So today I finished the last of the big edits for Eternity's Refuge, the one that's coming out in November,
Mm-hmm.
and sent that back to my editor for her to do her thing with it.
Okay.
So for editing, it's more about like chunks of time, I'd say. When I'm actively drafting a book, as I'm starting to draft the fourth book, my first priority is to get a summary of the book down.
Okay.
I am definitely not a pantser. I have to have a plan before I
All
get
right.
into it.
So this summary is like an outline then?
Yeah, so it's sort of the main events of I'd use the 3-act structure in my writing.
Okay.
I find it the easiest for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat down, my students were working on a project independently today. So while I was in my class, I wrote down the summaries of the 3 acts, and now I'm going to be kind of giving one-word summaries of each chapter. From there, I can flesh things out a little further and start writing the book. And when I'm actively drafting, when I'm not pre-writing or editing, I try to hit about 1,500 words a day,
Okay.
depending on how busy I am.
Right.
So I'll sit down and I'll do about 500 words at a time, 3 times a day. I break it up
Oh, nice.
throughout the day.
Nice. And do you allow yourself to write? I don't want to say badly, but just rawly without worrying about correcting grammar and things as you're going along?
I'd say for the most part, I don't really have an issue with grammar. Grammar
Right.
isn't something that takes a whole lot of correction time.
Mm-hmm.
Using the wrong word occasionally or a misplaced comma, perhaps,
Sure.
because of course there's going to be a grammar mistake in an 80 to 90,000 word manuscript. But I would say that, if I notice something pretty glaring, I'm probably going to fix it right there.
Right. Right.
But if it's a small mistake, I'm not going to go back and fix it because that's what the proofreading phase is for.
Right. And once you get your draft done, how many subsequent passes do you do on your book before you send it off for, I guess, to your editor, or do you have beta readers? How does that work for you?
I do have beta readers, so I actually send the rough draft to my beta readers to kind of get an idea of how they feel about the story.
Right.
A couple of them are really mad at me.
Oh, you must have killed somebody off.
I'm not telling, but of course, there's only a few reasons why people get mad.
Exactly. Or the wrong triangle corners got together, or something like that.
Yeah. So twists and turns, and of course, it's the third book in the series, so it kind of has to be a turning point. It's the midpoint. In order to continue to hold interest, it has to be something more what's the word I'm looking for?
Dramatic,
yeah, more dramatic than the previous two. So it's the stakes continue to rise, and then so I send that to my beta readers. They get a look at it. I do actually send it to my editor at the same time. She suggests some story improvements, how to kind of amp up the emotional parts of it. Because sometimes, in my head, of course, it's coming across exactly the way I intend it, but no one else lives in my head. So she's like, okay, spell this out a little bit more here, add a little bit more of this character. And then I'll spend some time doing that. It'll go back to her for one more pass for any remaining story things that might need to be added to, or just heightened a little bit,
Right.
and she'll do copy edits at the same time. Then I'll apply those changes, run it through my proofreading software, and do a read through myself, which is usually the first time I read through the book in its entirety. And once that's finalized, we do the cover and the formatting, and it's sent to the presses.
Okay. And are you traditionally published, or do you self-publish?
Sort of an indie hybrid thing, because I
Okay.
own a publishing house. So
Oh,
my
okay.
publishing house publishes it, but it's an actual company. It's just really small right now.
Sure. Okay, and let's turn over now to the actual the books that you've written yourself. So you've got your fourth book coming out in November?
The third one.
The third one, sorry. That's right. You said you were working on the fourth. Okay, and how many books are planned in the series?
So far in the main series, I have 5 planned.
Okay.
I have ideas for spin-offs for it, but I think I'll probably leave those until I've explored some other projects.
Okay, that's an interesting number because it usually is either 3, 6, or 7, maybe sometimes, but 5 a bit unusual. Is that the length of your story is what it is, right?
It is what it is. Originally, I had planned a trilogy, but as I was planning the books, I noticed that the third book was just getting absolutely massive with all the things that I wanted to include in it, and I thought that third book could really be broken up into 3 more. So we ended up with 5.
All right. So let's talk about your books then. Do you have an elevator pitch for the series?
Yeah. So Elior Barbadanya is the bastard prince of a disgraced royal and an ambassador. And one day when his brother is lost in a magical explosion, he has to figure out where he is and figure out his new place in the world now that he's encountered magic beyond what he previously knew existed.
Okay, and is he on a quest for something, or
in the first book, he's on a quest to find Eternity's Well, the namesake of the book.
okay?
So for them, he and his friends believe that it's going to give them answers to their questions, give them some sort of magical boon to fulfill their personal goals.
And I assume that if it does that, it probably also opens up new questions, which is the fuel for your next books, right? Okay, and Eternity's Well, it sort of sounds like the Dark Tower from the Stephen King series. Does this lead into other dimensions, realities, or anything like that?
And I guess I wasn't as original as I thought it was. It does.
Oh,
It
okay.
does.
Are you not familiar with that series? Or?
I'm not. I've never read it. I haven't read Stephen King.
Pardon me?
I haven't read Stephen King, actually.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I'm not a huge reader of horror, so.
Yep. Well, Dark Tower is it's a minestrone soup of Western horror, fantasy, science fiction. Short description would be think of Clint Eastwood's The Man of No Name with No Name mixed with Lord of the Rings. Because the main character is a gunslinger named Roland, and it's based on the poem. Is it Child? To the Dark Tower Came. Is that Robert Browning? I should know that. But yeah, you should check that series out. But you'd have to read a couple of his other books before, because there's a bit of a tie-in. Actually, the Dark Tower series ties all of King's fiction together. So
that's what I've heard. I've heard about the books. I just haven't actually read them myself.
Yeah. Okay, so that's very cool. Now you're up to the third book is going to be released. The first 2 were called Eternity's Well. The second one was called Eternity's Mirror. The third one's called Eternity's
Refuge.
Oh, okay, that's a bit different. And is that a place, or what is that?
So each of the books take this idea of eternity and expand on what it means in the context of the book,
Mm-hmm.
because it deals with a lot of supernatural and existential types of things.
Okay.
So there's a big religious tie-in with the book, sort of. I know that Christopher Paolini played a little bit with religion in his inheritance cycle. And I've done quite a bit of that here, where religion plays a huge part. The deity is a pretty big character in the book.
Okay.
And so there's this partnership between different characters at different times, and how that plays in with sort of the mythos of the world.
Okay.
So each of the books takes on a different aspect of the deity's influence
Okay.
in their world, and how they cope with that, whether it be for their benefit or challenge.
Okay. And does the series follow one main character, or are there a couple of characters? How's that set up?
So initially, when I started writing, I thought that it was a cast of characters. But it really is one main character throughout,
Okay.
with strong supporting secondary characters that act like main characters. So it's sort of akin to something like Rick Riordan's Heroes of Olympus books, where it will jump between points of view, but Percy Jackson is always going to be the main character of a Percy Jackson book.
Right.
So.
Right. And do you write in first person or third person?
Primarily in third person. For me, it was easier switching between points of view with that.
Okay.
One project that I have started working on, but probably won't finish until after the 5th book is released, I am writing in first person. I am pretty excited about that one, because that's a retelling of Aladdin's story through the eyes of the heroine.
Oh, okay. Very cool. So you've got this series going here, and is there anything that you can say about the 4th book, title or anything, or is it too early yet?
The title is Eternity's Edge.
Eternity's Edge. Okay. And I assume that things are going further and further out.
In a way, it does. It's sort of the idea of a precipice, because, of course, I actually knew the titles pretty early on. So I've got Eternity's Edge, and then the 5th one, the final book in the series, is Eternity's End.
Okay. Is it, would you consider the series YA or older?
I think it kind of straddles that space between YA and adult. I'd say that it's a really great, the first one is a really great read for maybe later high school, or people just kind of starting to move out of YA.
Okay.
The 4th book, I mean, as we get through it, it deals with more mature themes, more mature decisions. It's definitely not inappropriate for a YA audience.
Right.
Because I'm not a sex writer, so it's not going to be anything like that. But it does get more, there's more violence, I would say, and that's definitely something that some parents might be concerned about.
Sure.
But I wouldn't say that it's not a YA book, but I wouldn't put it firmly in that space.
What's the age of the protagonist?
At the start, he's 19, 20.
Okay. Yeah. So you're just at the edge of, yeah. And most YAs in first person too, I believe. So
a lot of it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's the span of time for the books? Like how much does the character age over the course of the series?
About 3 or 4 years.
Okay. All right. And let me see. So we've got the YA. edge there, and you're hoping to have the series done in 2 years, I guess.
I am planning on having the last book, if all goes according to plan, probably come out for the holiday season next year.
Next year. And
Yeah.
then you mentioned that you were working on another book, which is in first person, right?
hmm
And
So that one will be more firmly YA, a
okay,
YA romance fantasy.
okay. So just circling back to your series now, so you outlined the whole series before you started the first book?
Sort of. I had a very vague idea of where I wanted to go. I had a much stronger picture of the first book.
Okay,
I'd say that the rest of the series came into more detail after I finished the first book.
sure.
At that point, I'd spent enough time with the characters that they made sense to me. I knew where they were going, and I knew the story that I wanted to tell. So I've had the final scene in my head. Haven't actually written it down, but I've had the final scene in my head for about a year now.
Okay. And that was going to be my next question. Did you know the ending before you started? Because I know some writers have to know the ending before they start, and other writers don't want to know the ending because then it says it takes all the fun out of the process. So,
Yeah, I think for me, I had to know the ending because I have to know where it's going. If I'm going to plan a series, I have to know what the end is so that I can work towards it. Because otherwise, I get really lost.
all right. And is there a main baddie or antagonist in the series throughout the
There
series?
is, there is.
Okay.
I took quite a bit of inspiration from Islamic folklore for that.
Oh, okay.
So our main baddie is a jinn,
Mm,
which according to Islamic, similar to what we might call a genie, but
sure.
a lot scarier and fiery.
Okay. And what's his goal?
His goal is to completely dismantle the structure of life that the deity of the series has set up to sustain the world.
Okay. Ambitious.
He's very ambitious. He's angry and he holds a grudge for something that was kind of his fault anyway, but villains don't want to take responsibility for the evils that they've inflicted on the world for themselves.
Right. Okay. And is there uh, is there any romantic elements interest in the book?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it just
Well,
one-on-one, or is there a triangle or anything like that? Or
you know, I've never really loved triangles, so it's
okay.
more there are a couple pairs and they have to kind of figure things out for themselves. The romance was never really um, the main focus, and I actually decided to include it because I had a student that I taught I taught my first book in my English class last year,
Mm.
and I had a couple girls that kept on asking, "Does the second one have romance in it?" And I thought, if it's gonna get people interested, why not? So it wasn't necessarily something that I intended, but it turned out to be a really good choice for the book. So I
Right.
think it adds a lot of depth for the characters to have those feelings.
Yes.
About,
It's no fluke that like the romance genre in general is the number one selling um, you know genre out of all books. So to have it in any other type of genre is always a good thing.
yeah.
And
So there's not a whole lot of conflict on that side. I mean, there's some, but it's
sure.
more like regular couple conflict
Okay.
and kind of working through that. So my thing was I didn't want to do a love triangle. I just wanted to show how a healthy relationship does actually work things out
Okay.
without that being the main focus of the series.
Right. Sure. I gotcha. Um, is that just a little more on the technical side? Then what did you use to write with? Do you use Word, Scrivener,
I use Scrivener.
Grammarly? You use Scrivener? Do you use Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid? Anything like that?
I do use Pro Writing Aid to
Mm-hmm.
do my proofwriting. I find it helpful to move it from one program to another to do the proofreading
Right.
because that's my first full read through of it, and it's catching all the grammar, spelling, or possible.
Right. And what what do you consider your writing strengths? Are you better at, like, say, description, or are you better at dialogue? Are you better at character? And what do you think you need to work on?
Oh gosh. This is hitting me where the hubris is, because I feel like I've improved so much. Not that I'm
Sure.
saying that I don't have any room for improvement, but I'm
Hmm.
having a hard time thinking of which one of those areas is my strongest or weakest at the moment, because it all feels like it's kind of developed enough. I
Right.
think that um, maybe character might be my weakest.
Okay.
Um, Particularly, mostly because I'm told, oh, bring a little bit more of this out there, bring a little bit more of it that out there, and I don't think about those moments when I'm doing a first draft. It's more my
Hmm.
editor that says we need more emotional pull here. So maybe
Okay.
that's my area where I need to continue to work, is to kind of really feel things with my characters in a more visceral way.
Right. And what were the biggest lessons you learned between, say, writing the first book and then the subsequent book?
It wasn't even a writing thing, because I
No.
think that came relatively easily, and I have a really good editor that gives great advice
Mm.
and does so in a way that makes it feel like it's my idea.
Right.
So he's awesome. I think the biggest thing that I learned was, however someone gets into the business of writing, whether it is traditional, indie, or self-publishing, or a combination of that,
Hmm.
be entirely educated about the process. Because my first cover editor, or cover designer, I should say, cover designer,
Hmm.
kind of ripped me off a
Mm.
little bit. And of course,
Okay.
she doesn't see it that way. And it was a fine cover, but it wasn't selling. It didn't fit the genre. It wasn't exactly what I asked for, and it cost entirely too much for
Mm.
what I got. So I think just being completely educated about the entire process, if you're going to go the self or indie publishing route,
Hmm.
is so incredibly useful.
Right.
And then you want to have someone in your corner if you're going to go traditional. If you're going to go traditional, even if it's with smaller presses, you
Hmm.
need an agent, you need someone who knows how to read contracts. So even if you don't have an agent, even if you've gone to a smaller press that doesn't need you to have an agent, you need a lawyer. Someone
Right.
that's going to understand and be able to read the contracts. It's just, you have to know 100% what you're getting into every step of the way, because it's such an intense business.
Hmm.
And one
Right.
slip up and it's, the book is going to be less successful than it was. Because
Hmm.
after I changed the cover, I started actually selling more books.
Oh,
I'm
very
not a
good.
bestseller as of yet, but
Hmm.
I get one or two sales a month.
Hmm.
Um, just, and the only thing I changed was the cover, and I did a couple proofreads. But when you're shopping on Amazon,
Hmm.
you don't know that there's a couple things that need to be proofed that were missed on the
Right.
first one.
Right. So, since you've mentioned this person so often, how did you find your editor?
I actually found her through Readsy.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that.
Readsy is sort of an all-encompassing, like, professional writing platform where you can
Okay.
connect with ghostwriters, with editors, with publicists,
Okay.
marketing experts, cover designers, pretty much anything you name it. It's a
Mm.
little bit more expensive than something like, say, Fiverr or 99 Designs or something like that, but it's
Hmm.
well worth the money.
Okay.
And after the first book, I actually didn't go through Readsy again. We've been working independently with each
Mm.
other. So it was a little less expensive that way, since she didn't have to give a cut to the big company. So that's always a
Mm.
possibility. Finding someone that you really like to work with, you may
Yep.
not have to go through the Readsy platform again, as long as you
Right.
establish a working relationship.
Okay. Very good. And you mentioned that you have your own publishing company too.
I do.
And do
Yeah.
you publish other writers?
We are actually working on our first children's book
Mm.
from another author now.
Okay.
So we're kind of in the typesetting phase, where we really figure out what we want each page to look like.
Hmm.
We found an illustrator, so we're hoping to have that done probably for. Initially, I was thinking holiday season this year. That now, with everyone's schedules the way they are, with
Hmm.
um, with different things getting in the way, I'm thinking more of an Easter, which works because the main character is a bunny. So
There you go. Very good. And are you planning to expand this, or are you going to keep it manageable, because you are writing at the same time, so you got to kind of
Right.
balance the two, right?
I think it just kind of depends on what happens. If we get big
Okay.
enough that I can
Mhm.
hire full-time staff, then I'm happy to hire a manager that would run the publishing side of things, and I would kind of step aside from that and just,
Mhm.
obviously I'd still own it. So
Sure.
big decisions would go through me, but acquisitions and things like that, I would be able to hand off and focus more on the writing and kind of the
Right.
bigger business decisions.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions I had. Is there anything that hasn't come up that you'd like to mention at this time?
Um, if anyone loves audiobooks, the first one is on Audible, and
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I
the
forgot to
second,
ask you about that.
yeah, the second
Okay.
one should be on Audible by late November,
And
Christmas. So
and
we're working.
who does the narration?
Oh goodness, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but
Okay.
he's
I was just
fantastic.
checking to see if it was you. That's me.
No, I don't do it.
Okay.
I was told that I should by a friend the other week,
Ah,
but
yeah. Because
I don't have the recording
oh,
capabilities for that.
okay.
So
Because that leads to another good question. Do you, when you're doing the final polish on your book, do you read it out loud to yourself just to see how it sounds in the ear?
I will
Ah,
usually.
okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I think that's the best way to catch big edits that need to
Yeah,
happen.
and
Because if
especially
you,
dialogue. Yeah,
yeah, with dialogue, it has to sound natural.
yeah.
The narrator is W.H. Thompson.
Okay, very good. And you're obviously happy with them?
Oh, yeah, he did a great job. I
Hmm.
think I went and I listened to something like 20 or
Hmm.
30 auditions before I
Okay,
picked him.
right.
So it was a difficult choice because I was not looking for someone with a British accent, because everyone in
Ah.
fantasy has a British accent. And I'm like,
Okay.
this is an American fantasy. I'm very proud of being an American because my grandparents came over from Cuba to get out of communism.
Right.
So I am very grateful to not live
Hmm.
elsewhere.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Well, Zachary, I want to thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best success with your upcoming book and the rest of your series and all your other endeavors. And when your next book comes out, we'll have you on again, hopefully, and we can find out how things have
Good.
progressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All righty. Well, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your weekend,
You too. Thank you
even though
so
you have
much.
to work.
Yes.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Okay.